America was entering its second industrial revolution during the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Therefore, with America becoming more industrialized, this meant they had more factories. With building more factories, they had needed more workers, and these workers immigrated from all over the U.S. and the world. However, most cities were not equipped for this many workers, making overcrowding a large problem for about 30 years. Since these workers had just moved here, they were living in many unstable structures throughout the cities, and including barns, and of course, these barns were made of wood. This didn't seem to be much of a problem until October 8, 1871 in Chicago, when an overpowering fire was started. This fire spread insanely fast throughout the city due to all of the unstable wooden structures, and most of the factory workers and immigrants were the ones living in them. There were over 17,000 buildings destroyed throughout 2 days of fire. The fire killed and injured over 300 people, and leaving about 100,000 homeless and scared. The city had had a lot to manage, and these homeless people were not on the top of the priority list. And this is when the Chicago Relief and Aid Society had made their big break to help these victims and assist Chicago in rebuilding its once beautiful city. With Chicago having so many victims to help, the society unfortunately could not offer a large amount of relief to any one group of victims, and therefore they were frowned upon by many bystanders. Although the society only offered the victims basic necessities, they had immensely impacted these victims' lives by creating a scientific form of charity, by cutting the city of Chicago into quadrants based on these victims' needs, and holding meetings to bring in volunteers and ultimately utilizing those volunteers for various tasks.
This society has made a large impact on our lives and impacted many charities and aid societies in this generation, and also they have influenced the way charities approach large disasters. Also, this society has made an impact on the national and international level, impacting other countries and spreading ideas that are still impacting our lives today.
The society, and I quote, founded in 1851, sought to exercise a scientific and disinterested model of urban elms, and they distributed application forms to those seeking aid. Scientific charity was ultimately made up due to the limited government and the self-reliance in different cities. In Chicago at this time, the city had a very limited government, making restoring the city very difficult, and that is why these victims of the fire would fill out applications based on what they needed and also how much the fire had damaged them. The society had then used these applications to separate the city into quadrants and help all of the victims that they possibly could in the shortest amount of time and with using as little money as possible. They stayed organized with these applications and forms, keeping track of the people they helped, and this is also how they helped so many victims in a short amount of time and ultimately had a greater outcome after the fire. This also helped the society because they could not get too attached to any one group of victims because they did not offer any more than the basic necessities and basic housing. With using this specific type of charity, it heightened the number of victims helped because the society could go to those who needed the most aid and work their way down a list of people. Also, the fact that the society had stayed so organized had helped them in the long run because they knew exactly who they were helping and what those people needed in order to be safe and get what they needed after the fire had struck. The society, and I quote, separated its work into different areas of contributions, shelter, employment, transportation, and health. They did this in order to keep the city as organized as possible, and they had also done this so they could spread out the different workers and volunteers to restore the city as soon as possible. This was extremely helpful because all of the different workers and volunteers had different skill sets, making some jobs easier than others, and this ultimately sped up the restoration of Chicago and all of its people. From this picture, one can see that the fire had spread crazily and quickly throughout the entire city, leaving numerous jobs for the society. This was the amount of damage caused by the fire and why it was essential for the society to split the city into quadrants. Also, they could see where the most victims were based off of this map, making things easier on everyone. The society had had great ideas to hold meetings throughout different parts of the city in order to bring in as many volunteers as they possibly could so they could help all of the victims in the shortest amount of time. There was a lot of work to be done, and the society had known that they needed a helping hand. They would hold these mass meetings to bring in as many volunteers as possible because they had such a large task on their hands. These volunteers could do various tasks, including building houses, collecting donations, and distributing donated food and clothes. These volunteers would also travel from city to city in Illinois to collect donations from various groups of people in order to help these victims and ultimately try to give them the best outcome as possible. Also, these volunteers were some great people because they also donated their own time to those individuals who were more affected by the fire. These volunteers donated their own time and care to help the victims that were more affected than them by the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. They also extremely impacted these victims because they had given them hope and a chance to survive after this terrible disaster that had affected so many citizens of Chicago. In conclusion, the Chicago Relief and Aid Society greatly impacted many lives in the 18 and 1900s, and their legacy lives on today. Although we do not have many relief societies these days, we do have many soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and we also have something called the Salvation Army. We also have things like the Wounded Warrior Project, which works much like the Chicago Relief and Aid Society, helping people in need. However, this project helps veterans who were deployed that become injured and could not come back and continue on with a normal and healthy lifestyle. There are so many organizations out there that help numerous amounts of different people, and there are even relief societies on the national and international level. Just like the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, these people help all over the world, and they are stationed in many different countries to help as many people as possible after disasters. The Chicago Relief and Aid Society started a chain reaction of charities here in Chicago, and to this day we are helping more and more people in need than we ever could have before.